Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to the second of the three webinar series. This month we are looking at race day nutrition. Now, it's not really a over exaggeration to say that if you get your nutrition wrong, it can completely send all of your training can be worth very little. Um, I'd rather have somebody who was quite undertrained, who had a good nutrition strategy, than somebody who's really fit but had a very poor nutrition strategy. It really is that important. A lot can go wrong. So let's start off. A little bit about myself. My name's Simon. I'm a professional triathlon coach. I'm also a certified nutrition coach. I've been helping people prepare for Ironman, half Ironman, and some shorter stuff for about 8 years now. So here we're going to have a look into how we fuel ourselves to be able to have success on race day. So, it really is a bit of a non-negotiable race, nutrition for race day. Unless you're doing a sprint in which you hope to finish under about the 90-minute mark, okay, you really can't afford to neglect or overlook or, oh, I don't need to worry about that. Because your body needs calories in the same way that a car needs fuel. If your car breaks down, if your car runs out of fuel, you don't blame the car for running out of fuel. You blame you for being an idiot and not filling it up with petrol. Okay. So, our bodies cannot run without fuel. Now, we're a little bit different from cars in the fact that our body can oxidize fat. So it can turn body fat and burn it and turn it into fuel, which is the premise of weight loss, really. Um, but our body can't turn fat into fuel fast enough to be able to maintain exercise. We're always going to find ourselves in a deficit. Eating too little or too much can be equally damaging. So if you have too little to eat, you can find yourself weaving around the course, shaking, your vision starting to go, and the race is a complete write-off. Equally, if you eat too much, you can find yourself suffering with nausea, with some sort of a stitch, cramps. It really can ruin your race equally. So it's about trying to find that balance. There's a lot of trial and error, which is going to be a bit of a theme of today. If you've ever heard anybody talking about a marathon that they've done, and they talk about hitting the wall, okay? This more often than not isn't a case of some kind of, mythical wall that people hit. Generally speaking, it's what happens when people run out of energy. Now, it's especially prevalent in the marathon because your body has around about 90 minutes of glycogen available. Glycogen being energy stored in our muscles. So our body has about 90 minutes of fuel to be able to for us to be able to sort of train and race on. After that, we need to fill that up. And now, when most people are training for a marathon, they won't run a huge amount over that 90-minute mark. And often the first time they need to think about having fuel is in the race itself. They don't have anything to eat and their performance falls off a cliff. This is poor nutrition, unfortunately. Um, at the bottom there, fueling plan needs to be sustainable. Okay, this needs to be something that we can eat, something that isn't going to cause us huge amounts of upset. The flavors aren't going to be the same all the time. It needs to be something that we can maintain for the duration of our race without getting really sick of it. Yes, no matter how much you like apple flavored gels, I'm pretty sure that after 14 hours, you're never going to want to see one again. Okay, so we want to try and find a way to fuel ourselves that's going to help be a bit sustainable. So, what different fuel sources do we have for our body? So, I'm very briefly going to go through this. I don't want to get too much into the science. I want to keep this accessible. I want to keep this actionable, but we do need to just go over a few terms. So, we've got carbohydrate, which is broken down really quickly for energy. So, you've got grains, vegetables, and fruits are your primary suspects, as well as sugar encompassing those. So it's not just sort of your grains and wheats that you tend to think of starchy carbohydrates. It covers an awful lot of things. Next up, we've got fats, which are very high in calories. So they provide us with a large amount of fuel for our body. But as I said earlier, our body can't oxidize them, turn them into energy fast enough to sustain performance. So we wouldn't normally have those during a race. Examples: cheese, oil, butter, and nuts are fats. Now, very few single foods are simply one macronutrient. A steak isn't pure protein. Cheese isn't pure fats, okay? There are, of course, bits are added to that. However, there are a few examples, such as glucose is purely sugar. But generally speaking, Try to look at ingredients rather than foods themselves. And protein tends to get largely from animal produce, but it does also come from other seeds and pulses, for those of you that might be vegan. Um, Helps the body to recover from exercise. So this is something that it's important for us to have after the workout and the racing, not necessarily useful for us to have during the race. Okay, might touch on that a bit later, but for the most part, you probably want to be having carbohydrates to fuel your race. Somehow my dog has closed the curtain. Good job, Poppy. Um, so carbohydrate comes in many forms. It's what we're going to be using to fuel most of our race day. Sugar is the one that is going to be most useful to us. If you look at this diagram here, we're looking at the what they call glycemic index. So the GI value of different foods. Okay, high GI foods are we're able to turn into energy really quickly. Stuff like sugar. Low GI, like vegetables and fish and the like, it takes a lot longer. So, people always say, oh, if you have porridge, that will keep you full all day. Similar idea is that oats are a low GI food, whereas sugar is a high GI food. Of course, if you have a bowl of porridge with some fruit, for instance, then you have and honey, you have the high GI coming from those sugars and the low GI from the oats themselves. As I said on the previous slide, very few of these foods are, entirely one macronutrient. And again, fat oxidation can support but not replace carbohydrate intake. I'm not going to go into keto, low-fat diets here. It's not the rabbit hole I want to go down. But even those who follow a keto diet are going to be taking on sugars, carbohydrates during an event because it'd be very difficult for them to maintain high performance and not. If you just want to, if you want to do something really slow, you could probably get away with primarily using fats. But if you actually really wanted to perform to a high level to actually do yourself justice, then you're going to need to have some carbs in your diet on race day at least. So this last side on science, glucose and fructose. So these are two kinds of sugars. Okay. Glucose is what we get the majority of sugars, the sugar that we get the majority of is it broken down from. So a lot of foods will be broken down into glucose because glucose is the only fuel that our brain can have that can use. So it gets broken down in our intestines, turned into glucose, sent up to our brain and to our muscles, of course. Fructose is a fruit-based sugar that we get mainly from fruit, which gets broken down and can be turned into glucose at a later stage. But the reason I'm going through this is that the body can process fructose and glucose simultaneously. Okay, so if we look at this image we've got here, think of fructose as being a bit like a bus lane. Okay, we have the car lane, which could be your glucose lane, which is really backed up because the body can only absorb so much glucose per hour. Okay, and all of those gels that you're having full of glucose, your body can only process them at a certain rate. If we have fructose, that uses a different pathway, so we can then use twice as much. So rather than just having all that traffic backed up in one lane, fructose gives us a bus lane that we can send the buses down, move more people, move more things faster. Most sports products will include a mixture of glucose and fructose, but do check the label. Some of those that are pure glucose won't give you quite the same energy hit as those which have a balance of glucose and fructose. If you're looking at a ratio of what it is that you're looking for, either in products or over the course of a race, course of an event, a one-to-one ratio is about right for most athletes. But play around yourself, experiment. See what works for you. It may be that like some people really struggle to digest fructose. You have to find out what it is that works for you. But essentially, we're trying to take fuel and turn it into glucose that then can be synthesized by our muscles and our brain. Now for the science, Einstein. Let's get down to the actual practical, actionable stuff that we want to learn about. So how do we get those all-important carbs into our body? Well, I've got a few examples here. Okay, top left, I've got an energy gel. So these are sort of semi-solids. Some of them are very liquidy. Some of them are a bit more almost sort of chewy, slimy. If anyone's had the Morton gels, they're a bit like that. They sort of slide down your throat a little bit. These are a great hit to pick you up. Most of them have around about 30 grams of carbohydrate in. If we're aiming for around about 60 grams an hour as a minimum, assuming this has got a one-to-one ratio of fructose and glucose, then we about 2 gels an hour should keep us going. That may not sound like much, but it's going to add up quite quickly. And as I said at the start, it doesn't matter how much you like something. If you have 24 of them over a 12-hour event, you're going to start to get a little bit sick to the back teeth of them. I find gels are really good for digging me out of a hole, but I personally don't build my race strategy entirely around gels. In the middle there, at the top, we've got a Cliff Bar. Okay, so it's sort of an energy bar, anything that's a solid bar, normally with oats, bound together with sugar quite often. So you got there a mix of the sugars that are binding it together that would give you that high GI, quick energy hit, combined with the oats, which would give you that slightly longer term energy. I personally, I like to feel like there's something physical in my stomach that's digesting. Okay, so I quite often will go for some kind of energy bar over simply using drinks and gels. But again, it is down to the individual. It's about what you can stomach. Some people find it really hard to digest solids while they're exercising. When you are exercising, whether it's training or racing, your body is dictating, sort of sending so much blood to your muscles, it doesn't have as much blood to send to your digestive system. So your digestion rate slows. So you can end up where your body just can't quite digest enough of that fast enough to be able to clear the backlog. Okay. So it really comes down to an individual to sort of to try to work out. Sorry, have a drink. To try to do what they can to aid their digestion, find out what it is that sits on the stomach, what goes down easy. Next to it there, we have some powder, which is used as you put it into a drink. It's an energy drink solution. That gives you carbohydrate. You can look on the label, it'll tell you how much carbohydrate you have. It will tell you, what it's made up of. Now, this is a really popular option because it allows you to alternate. Say, if you have a 500 milliliter bottle of water and you put enough carbohydrate powder in there to give you 30 grams, and you have an energy gel, suddenly you can be sipping on a drink and have a gel within that hour, and that's fueled you up without having to have two energy gels back to back, which can be a bit sticky, a bit sickly, all that, as well as expensive. Energy drink is one of the cheaper sort of bespoke ways of doing this. But again, I encourage people to use all of these really if it's something they enjoy. Bottom left-hand corner, we've got some what I would call, I mean, this is SIS Beta Fuel. I'm not sponsored by SIS or anything like that. I make a distinct note not to have sponsorship agreements with companies because I want to be able to be very, independent and to recommend what I think is best rather than what I'm getting paid to recommend people. But this is some really high concentrated fuel. So we've got here gels and drink mixes with up to 80 grams of carbohydrate in them. Okay, so that's over an hour's worth of fuel in one package there. As we're going to get into, there's only so much that you can take with you when you're out training or racing. So if you can have an hour and a half's worth of fuel in one drinks bottle or one gel, that has the potential to save a lot of space and you can carry a lot more of your nutrition with you. At the bottom there in the middle, we've got real food. So, there's nothing saying that you have to pay the money to have these special bespoke products, okay? What you're paying for with these energy products is convenience, okay? You're paying to have something in a little wrapper that you can open up, you can slurp on, you can drink, which will work well for you. There's, the energy powder drink. You could just put sugar inside water and give it a squeeze of lemon to take the bitterness off and use that instead, okay? You don't need to have these specific products. It's, find what it is that works for you. I actually quite like having some real food when I'm doing a longer race because I like something to sit on my stomach a little bit. I quite like those like salted chocolate bars that you can get. Whether or not they're sort of nuts and salt and they've got sort of a bit of a chocolate base, I find that really picks me up in a race. So, think if you are doing a long training session, what am I craving right now? What is it I would murder for? If you really can't stop thinking about a steak, maybe you do need a bit of protein because your body's going to be craving what it is that it needs. There are no hard and fast rules here. And then finally, we've got a bag of Haribo. That's a bit of a classic. At the end of the day, it's sugar in an easily transportable form. It's cheaper than gels. Obviously, it's a bit fiddlier. You got the bag, have to open it up, little ones. But for cyclists who do long rides, who can pull over, open up a bag of Haribo, neck it, and keep going, that's quite a lot better. But if we are, for the sake of argument, going to be doing triathlons here, we probably don't want to stop to break out the star mix. So the practicalities of this is that, we can't have a buffet cart with us on a race. We have to think about what it is that we're going to take and, why. So look at the location of aid stations on the course. That's a really big one. If you are doing a bike course that's going to be a 90-kilometer loop, see how many aid stations there are. So you can work out when it is that you might want to take on some extra fuel. We're going to get into aid stations in a bit more detail in a bit, but it's important to research what they do. Aid station, in fact, just so we aren't making any assumptions here. An aid station is somewhere where an athlete can stop, and they can pick up energy bars, energy gels, water, isotonic drink. It's a place for you to get food, essentially. But sort of see where they are so you don't miss them, or think, oh, I'll stop at the next one if there isn't another one for sort of 40, 50 kilometers. It's really important that you try the products on offer. Now, it's not always really obvious when you look at a race website what kind of food is available. Email the race organizer if you need to. Because if, for instance, I know I've tried some goo gels in the past and they're horrible, sickly, really thick. I hated them. So if I'm ever doing a race and I see there are goo gels, then I know that I need to be completely self-sufficient. I can't afford to just turn up at an aid station and go, oh, I wonder what they've got for us to eat, because I may hate everything. I can't stand banana flavor. Sometimes you turn up, all they've got is bananas and tropical gels, and it just, it's not going to work for me. So you need to do your homework. Don't rely on them to save your bacon. If you can be self-sufficient, especially up to a race around the 70.3 distance, I recommend you try that, but it is more difficult with Ironman. Um, yeah, try the products ahead of time. If you're doing a full Ironman event, you have special needs bags, which I recommend that you use. So these are bags that you can collect each time you complete a lap of the bike course, or in some cases at the far end of the bike course if it's a one lap. And the idea is you can put in there whatever you want. And I recommend you put some stuff in there you think you really crave, you really might want, something to pick you up. Maybe if you know that you're going to take one lap of fuel with you, of gels and drinks and that, and have another lap's worth in that special needs bag, you can pull over, restock your bike, do the second half of the race. If it's not your first time Ironman and you want to set a personal best, the time that you spend playing around with the special needs bags, you may just ride past it and think, oh, I'll sort it out myself. Okay. It's up to you. But if it's your first time, you're not worried about setting, a really fast race, then I do recommend you take advantage of them, even if you decide not to use them, you know that they're there. And it's not especially easy to just jump off the race course and grab a Greg's. If you are doing, especially if you're doing an Ironman event, an event where the roads are closed, there'll be barricades running along the road. You're not a prisoner. You could go out and do that, but it might mean you pull over, unclip, carry your bike over this fencing. It gets a little bit sticky. Okay, so don't rely so much. Unlike a cycle sportive where there might be a petrol station that people stop off to get things, in triathlon that's not always the case. So when you approach an aid station on the bike, it's pretty self-explanatory on the run. If you are not using the aid station, stay to the right, or if you are sort of in most other places in the world where they drive on the other side of the road, the left, whichever, you get to the opposite side of the road to the aid station, because there are going to be lots of athletes who are all going to want to sort of converge on this one point. People might be cutting across you, might be going very fast, swerve in front of you. It can be quite chaotic. There is a higher risk of a crash around an aid station because people aren't paying attention. They're looking at the bottle, they're not looking at the riders around them. So if you're not going to be using it, swing out wide. As you approach the aid station, you'll probably hear the volunteers calling out what it is that they're holding. So the chances are they'll be shouting water, if they just have water, isotonic, if they're holding out isotonic, gels, bars, Flat Coke, Red Bull, whatever it is. Listen for them calling what it is. At Ironman events, they have flags. If you see that image there, there's a Gatorade logo there, which is so there you go. You've got water and Gatorade and cola. I can read there, so it tells you what you can get at each aid station. Um, so you can just sort of make it easy experience. If you're on the bike, then as you come through, they will be handing you full bottles, which you can take and you can put into your bottle holders. Now you probably have to chuck your old bottle, so don't take your favorite bottle with you at the race start. You probably need to chuck that. Most aid stations are a designated litter zone, which means that you can throw your rubbish to the side. Don't ever drop it in the actual road, but they'll probably have bins that you can aim for, if not volunteers we're picking it all up. Um, and you can drop stuff there, but there will normally be a sign at the end saying litter zone ends. And if you chuck something once you pass that sign, you could very easily get disqualified. They are quite strict about enforcing these because the roads that they use, the local government that they get the permission from, they want to know that they're looking after the environment, looking after the roads. And when you do get to an aid station, especially on the run where this is easier, don't take more than your fair share. I have done cycle events before where I've gone out and I've just been riding easy with someone doing their first 100K. And we get to the second aid station, they're all packing up. This is like all the fast guys took the food. And that's hard when you're at the back of the pack and then you come into an aid station looking for fuel and there's nothing left. So yeah, don't sit there and go, oh great, loads of free stuff here. Do be respectful. So carrying water on the bike, talking about aid stations and water. So we have some different options for carrying fuel here. In the top left, we have an aero bottle on a frame. Now you can take a sort of a circular water bottle and stick it on your down tube. It does create a surprising amount of drag. It will cost you a surprising amount of time. And if you stick a second bottle on the seat tube directly behind it, that will cost you a lot of time. We're talking about over an Ironman, it may cost you about sort of 10 minutes. Now, you may think, oh, well, it's only 10 minutes, but think how much fitness it would take you to be able to go 10 minutes faster over that. Imagine having to unclip and wait in a penalty tent for 10 minutes. It's quite a long time. So going for an aero bottle like that can help. However, it's very difficult to refill that. You can't just grab a new bottle off someone and stick it in that there because it's a very specialized type of bottle. So that kind of bottle, I'd say, suits longer time trials, perhaps, shorter triathlons, something like that. You wouldn't take something like that with you for an Ironman because even though it is aerodynamically optimized, it does create more drag than the other systems. So this one in the middle at the top is what they call a torpedo system. I've got one similar to that. It nestles between your aero bars. I've read that because it helps close the gap, because it's between your forearms, it actually does improve the airflow around the bike slightly. And you fill that up with water. And as you go along, you drink from that. Now, it's quite an easy way to drink. And what's nice is it's there in front of you. You've got a straw, so it reminds you when it's time that you need to keep drinking. Unlike if your bottles are out of sight and you're pushing hard, not thinking about hydration. The downside to it is that it's awkward to fill up. You might need to pull over at an aid station and actually squeeze the bottle in there. So that could offset any potential speed gains from that. Maybe some aero game. It depends. It's not an ideal solution. I mean, when I did my first Ironman, I had that because I knew that I didn't mind pulling over for 20 seconds and emptying a bottle into it. For some people, of course, that's going to be much different. I wouldn't do that over a short race, for instance. To the right of that, we have a bottle that is nestled within the aero bars. Now, this is really increasingly popular with triathletes because they can whip it out and replace it with a new one from the aid station as they go. Okay, unlike with the torpedo system. The issue is that as you're riding along, to reach forward and pull out that bottle and drink from it and return it is a little bit of a learned skill. Especially as triathletes, we're not renowned for our bike handling skills. So I would be a little bit cautious with that. Again, like give it a go, but practice with this first. Everything that I'm recommending you today, practice. Don't try it for the first time on race day, please. Bottom left-hand corner down there, we have a rear hydration system. So this is a very aerodynamic way of carrying your water. because it allows the bottles to be completely behind you, so they cause extremely little drag. It's very aerodynamic, it's very fast. The downside is that sitting reaching behind you to grab the bottle can be a tad awkward, and it's the kind of thing that if you're not especially confident doing it, it's a reason not to drink, you know? Um, so that's something to consider, something to think about. You know, a lot of the top Ironman athletes, the professionals, will do that because they know they're in for a long day. They're going to be drinking a lot, and that is the best way to carry that much water. And at the bottom, we've got this weird looking bike frame that's demonstrating inbuilt hydration solution for a bike. So that blue clear area can be filled with water, and there's a straw that runs along the top to the bike there, so you can carry a lot of water with you. Um, the downside to that is it's very expensive for you to get a bike like that. And if you fill it up with energy drink mix, you won't want to do that in training. You only want to do that for races. Because it can be very difficult to clean that fuel cell out and get that taste and that stickiness out of it. So but just for those of you who may be watching who are interested in sort of longer distance swimming, perhaps it's unlikely in any triathlon you'll need to take extra fuel. However, if you know you're going to be pushing closer to the sort of the cutoff of 2 hours 20 minutes in Ironman than you might like, as I said at the start, we've got about 90 minutes of energy with us. If you think you're going to be closer to that 2 hour mark, okay, it might be worth taking a gel with you, especially if you struggle to get food down you before a race, like I do. If you do start to feel a bit wobbly in the water, it can be helpful to have that. Sticking a gel up the leg of your wetsuit is the way to go about that. You can do it at both legs if you want. Could be a bit overkill. But if you stick it in your arm, that's going to sort of mess around with your stroke a little bit. Stick it up the sleeve of your wetsuit leg, and it's there if you need it, right? Um, and if somebody's doing a marathon swim, they normally have a floating feeding platform they can eat from, where they have lots of food available. So carrying fuel on the run. So most run courses, they'll have aid stations a lot more frequently than on the bike. On the bike, they'll be quite far apart. By the time you get on the run, they'll normally be every mile or two, especially at Ironman events, might be slightly further apart. In recent years, Ironman have been struggling to get the same volunteer numbers as they have in the past, so the stations have become a bit more spaced out as they found it harder to staff those stations. Um, but it's worth, you want to take advantage of these, even if it's just the water they're giving out. Um, if you have a real preference for real food, whoops, a daisy. You may want to consider a running vest. So it's one of the vests you see sort of ultra runners have with the water bottles that they can drink from. They've also got lots of little pockets in them where you can stick little like bars, rice cakes, anything else that you know that you crave on a longer run. It doesn't really add much to you. I use one when I do sort of half marathons in triathlons to make sure I've got the fuel that I want with me. Doesn't really slow me down. I'm still one of the faster runners. Just look a bit odd, but hey, I'm used to that. Um, I would advise against running with a water bottle in your hand. You can do it, but it does affect your running gear. It does make it uneven. You will cause your hips to drop a little bit on the side that you're holding that bottle. Again, if you do this all the time, it's not a terrible idea, but try to avoid heading out with one in your hand if you want to have a good, good solid run form. Um, when you get on the run as well, a lot of athletes will really struggle to digest solids. I've never had a problem. Some people, they just can't stomach the idea of anything solid when they're running. So in the last kind of 45 minutes, hour of the bike, you might want to avoid any solid food. So it's all digested by the time you get off the bike and rely on gels and water at that point. And again, when you're choosing fuel for the run, if you know that you struggle to digest solids, don't take a baked potato. Um, when you're on the run course, they will often have flat Coke and Red Bull available on the course. Just be a little bit careful here. If it's not something you've tried before, okay, don't just go neck a Red Bull and hope for the best. If you're really crashing, if you're thinking, look, if whatever somebody can give me that's wet and sweet, I need right now, give it a go. See how it goes. But if it's not something that you really like or got use for, just be careful. You don't want to be bringing it back up within a matter of minutes because it's not sitting right. So common nutrition sort of pitfalls, really, mistakes that people, well, not mistakes that people can make always, but things that happen to us as triathletes, and how to hopefully reduce the risk of these happening. Now, I can't guarantee if I had space on this side, I would have included an image of Alistair Brownlee, 2 times Olympic gold medalist, leading a race, having to stop clutching his stomach in visible pain because of the amount of because of the digestive discomfort that he had. It can happen to the best of us. It happened the last 70.3 that I did. I just felt awful. My stomach just like really let me down. I did use the same nutrition plan that I did before. Sometimes it just goes wrong. But if you follow some basic sort of guidelines, points here, we can hopefully reduce the risk of that happening. So a stitch, I think we've all been running and got stitched before. Um, Now we don't know exactly what causes it, but more often than not, people are more likely to get a stitch if they run and go play football with their friends just after dinner, for instance. Normally, it's to do with the digestion of it's sort of an inability to digest whatever it is that we're eating. So uh, just be mindful of that. If it's something you suffer with a lot on the run, ask yourself, okay, what did I eat before this, and how soon did I eat it? If it happens to you during an event, you think, okay, so what is it I've eaten prior to this? What is it that might have triggered that? It can be really hard to pinpoint it. If I had the answers of how to avoid all of these conditions here, I'll be a very rich man. But I don't. All I can give you is general advice to try and, things you can do to try and manage, reduce these risks. Um, Cramp is something that not more often than not, it's more likely to be somebody's poor muscle conditioning than it is the nutrition. But if you have insufficient levels of salt, that can affect the muscle's ability to contract properly. It can result in a big cramp. So, or at least it won't help these things. So I recommend that you top up your salt levels. We're going to go into that in a little bit, see if it helps. But again, at the end of the day, if you're asking your legs to do something they don't want to do, there's a chance they'll cramp up. Um, Nausea. I mean, this can be caused by too much sugar. Your body can't digest what you're giving it fast enough. You've drank too much. Dehydration. There are an awful lot of things that can cause us to feel nauseous. You probably know yourself what is more likely to make you feel sick than not. But it really is quite common for people if they are just, oh, I'll try some of that from an aid station. I'll have a drink of that, try some of that, knock that back. What's that over there? They've got a bit like a witch's cauldron bubbling along there. And I have had it when I've been, running along in events and I'm overtaking someone and suddenly they just projectile vomit out of nowhere and it narrowly misses my shoes. If you just throw loads and loads of fuel in your body without really any idea of what it is that you're doing or without knowing how it's going to react, these things can happen. By the time you get onto the run of a triathlon, especially a 70.3 or an Ironman, your body is in a very fragile state nutritionally. You need to be careful about what it is that we have. Um, Bonking. So that is simply, it's sort of the technical term, as it were, for when you run out of fuel, when you so low energy start sort of staggering around and your performance falls off a cliff. Okay, hitting the wall, bonking, crashing, whatever we call it. You just haven't eaten enough. Okay, or not in a way that your body is able to absorb. So the sort of solution to that is to eat a bit more. By the time you get those symptoms start and you find yourself in that hole, it's difficult to climb back out of it during that race, at least. Finally, one hyponatremia, long fancy word for drinking too much water, not enough salt. Okay, that can cause your brain and other areas of your body to swell because the salt isn't there to regulate the water moving between the cells. Can cause some really nasty symptoms, headaches, nausea. It can even cause people to slip into a coma and die in extreme cases. Okay, so don't take on too much water and make sure that you're using salt as well in having sort of electrolyte supplements, which we mention shortly. Um, so hydration is something that gets overlooked. Let me just wet my whistle again. Um, People talk about calories, carbs. People get into the really kind of sexy nutritional stuff, talk about all the different fuel sources. They forget that, it's quite important to hydrate. So if we are drinking as we're going along, we are replacing lost water from sweat and also maintaining what's called blood plasma levels. Now, blood plasma is a really fancy term for um, having just sort of the liquid element of our blood. Okay, if the blood plasma volume is low, our blood becomes quite thick and sticky. If the blood plasma volumes are high, it's a bit more watery and it allows it to move around the body easier. The knock-on effect of this is if your blood plasma levels are really low, your heart has to work a lot harder. It has to pump faster and more strongly to help move that blood around the body. Okay. If you're well hydrated, your heart rate will be lower. Okay. And it will allow your body to get all those all important red blood cells with the oxygen to your muscles faster and easier. Okay. So making sure that we are getting around about 500 milliliters of water an hour is a good target to go for. Now, I know some people may be going there, I can't drink that much. I need to keep going to the toilet. Well, the time that you lose from having to use the toilet will be less than the time you'd lose from having a real problem with dehydration. So you have to take a bit of a longer term view of this and just go, look, it's what I need to do for my performance. Now, if I have two bottles on my bike, I normally have actually the one I've been drinking from 750 milliliters here from Science and Sport. That gives me 1500 milliliters of water. That's enough for 3 hours. Okay. And that is, for 70.3, I can do the whole race on two bottles like that. Ironman, I'll need to replace them. But it's not maybe as big and scary as it may sound. I advise that you sip on your water little and often to improve your digestion. If you go and just chug, chug, chug and drink about half a bottle at once, chances are that is going to sit and slosh around on your stomach and it's not going to feel very nice. And it's impossible to replace all the fluid that you lose from sweat during exercise, especially those you heavy sweaters. There's no way you can replace it. Or most people finish an endurance event around about 3 to 4% dehydrated. So quite dehydrated, but it's again, you can't, unless you're maybe doing an ultra marathon where you're moving at a slower pace and it's easier for your body to digest things, you could maybe keep it up there. But even if you're doing an Ironman, it's going to be hard to replace every single milliliter you sweat out. So don't worry about having to tick that box. So to conclude, aim for at least 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour, primarily from sugars. But again, if you find that you really crave some fat or some protein during your ride, don't feel that you have to go and do that because the man on the webinar told you it has to be mainly from sugars. Experiment, find what works for you. But most people will find the best results from different kinds of sugars. Go for about 500 milliliters of water an hour. Replace lost salt with electrolyte tablets, but don't kill yourself with too much salt. Some people get in their head, got to replace salt. Salt is so important. The issue is if you have too much salt, if your electrolytes, you put too much salt in your water with the electrolyte supplements, then it can make you feel really nauseous, actually. If you remember Casino Royale, Daniel Craig, he realizes he's been poisoned. He grabs some salt sachets off the table, goes into the bathroom, pours all the salt into a glass, downs it, and that makes him bring up what it is that he's just eaten. Because that's the effect that's what he just drank, actually. But that is the effect that salt will have. So if you have too much, it can backfire. But if you head on to Precision Fuel and Hydration, actually, they have a good calculator there. Research the contents of the aid station ahead of time and practice with what they have to offer. Don't go for a really big race and try a gel that you picked up from the aid station for the first time. If it does give you a bad stitch, if it does make you feel nauseous, we don't want to find that out during your big race. It can be difficult for some companies, for instance, they don't ship the product they're using to that part of the world. Enovit, I think Ironman were using a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if they still are, but you couldn't actually get it in the UK, which caused problems. A lot of people had to rely on their own fuel sources. Your stomach can be trained as a muscle to an extent. So we said at the start, around about 30, your body can process about 30 grams of glucose, 30 grams of fructose. If you keep fueling, if you employ all this in your training, your body will become better to handle this. And as I said there, some athletes can consume up to 120 grams of carbohydrate an hour. And they are often the ones that perform the best because their body's just getting more fuel. Um, practice this in your training. You know, if you're watching this the night before your race, okay, don't try and go out there and do anything that's really left field there tomorrow just because I told you to do that, okay? You know, ideally you would be practicing this several months out in your training. And chances are you're probably going to get it wrong before you get it right. It is a bit of a trial and error aspect to it. If in doubt, do listen to your stomach, okay? Rather than forcing down this because, you know, I told you you need this much. If your stomach is saying, I never want to see another Jella game, respect that because the chances of it going quite wrong are relatively high. I believe we're on to yeah. So what I'll cover now is what to eat the day before a big ride, big run, or an event. So especially in the sort of the 18 hours ahead of a big ride or race, you want to start cutting down on fiber. Okay, you can't avoid it completely. It's in a lot of foods. We want to reduce that, not have too much in the way of fruit. We don't want to have bran flakes for breakfast, for instance. Um, you know, sort of, you know, loads of fresh fruit. Keep it a little bit beige. I know it's not great nutrition advice, but one of my go-to sort of meals to have the day before a race is sort of a fillet of fish that I've sort of poached, some greens and some boiled potatoes. So you've got the starch, you've got the vegetables, you've got a bit of protein in the fish that's easily digestible. It's really inoffensive. It's not going to make you feel unwell. Some people really like to go for pasta as well. I might have that for lunch. Sometimes if you're in a strange part of the world, you may not necessarily have access to things you'd normally have, but try to play it safe. Okay, this isn't the night to order the full tapas tasting platter and really get stuck in. Okay, chances of something disagreeing with you are relatively high if you try that. Um, on the morning for breakfast, a lot of people don't really tolerate lactose especially well, even if you're not lactose intolerant. Our digestive systems aren't designed to digest it. If you throw into that race day nerves, um, you know, strange nutrition gels and that we're taking in, then it is, you know, you're just making life a bit more complicated for you. If you go for something like toast, bagel, something simple like that, then it's probably going to sit on you a little bit better than going for something that's sort of higher in lactose, like that big bowl of milky porridge. Um, so next bit, for those of you who are thinking of sort of the long term here, just talking about going to go quickly through the services I offer. So I offer bespoke programs, which can either be just a training plan on their own, monthly contact, where we have a call every month and invite you the next month of training, or fully coached daily contact, all delivered via Training Peaks, or my Face on Performance programs, which are cheaper, personalized, but not bespoke programs, which are built around you, but they're not built from the ground up around you. We also have a WhatsApp group with other first-time triathletes, weekly Q&A call on Zoom, monthly one-to-one with me. And we go through training, mindset, nutrition, strength. It's not just a case of here's a training plan, off you trot. It's an all-inclusive program. If you're interested in any of those, visit my website, phasontriathlon.com. You should have, if you're watching this on YouTube, you should be able to find my website through there. So any questions for me? Apparently not. That's all right. You know, I appreciate it's quite a lot to take on. It's a lot of, you know, for some people, sort of new concepts. It can be quite technical, a little bit confusing at times. But if anyone has any questions, drop me a message on one of my social media profiles or my email address. Oh, I've got a message come up in the chat. Somebody who probably can't. Here we go. Yes, okay. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my mouse. Let's end the screen share. Yes, camelback for hydration. This is something I've talked to people about before. It's quite popular for people who come from a sort of a mountain biking background or what they might just sort of cycle commute, that they carry the camelback with you. The benefit of the camelback is you don't have to reach down to take your bottle out of the bottle case, drink it, and then replace it. It's very popular with mountain bikers because they can't really afford to take their hands off the handlebars. If they hit a tree root with only one hand on the handlebar, things go quite badly for them. The downside with the camelback is that if it's a rucksack that you're wearing on your back, you have another point of sort of that sort of rubbing on your shoulders. Also, a lot of triathlons tend to happen in the summer in quite hot weather, and that's just that water is going to heat up really quickly and become quite unpleasant to drink. Additionally, it's you're going to get quite a sweaty back from that. I'm not saying it's a terrible idea. I'm not saying don't do it, just something to think about. I've seen plenty of people in triathlons with camelbacks, but they're normally those that are more sort of towards the back of the pack, those who are just looking to get around. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, but there are reasons that the absolute fastest athletes don't tend to use them. I hope that helps. Let me know if it doesn't. Okay, great. Well, unless we've got any other questions, what I'll do is I will end it there. I hope you all found some use in that. Drop a if you leave a comment below on YouTube, actually, I'll get a notification about that. If you've got a follow-up question, do my best to help you. Well, all the best to any of you who are racing Bolton tomorrow. I know I dropped that in the group. Don't know if any of you have picked that up. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you all soon. No problems, Carol. Everybody enjoy. Take care now.
Thank you.